The microphone feedback echoed through the packed city council chamber. Marcus adjusted his grip on the small black USB drive. A certified bank check for $500,000 sat heavy in his left breast pocket. It was enough money to buy his daughter a house with central air and a backyard. It was enough to cover her asthma medication for the next 10 years. All he had to do was plug that drive into the podium laptop and tell one specific lie about the woman sitting 20 feet away. Elena Vance stared at the mahogany table. She was the most ruthless real estate developer in the state. Right now, she looked like a woman waiting for the executioner to drop the blade. Neither of them belonged in this room. But to understand how a broke building inspector ended up holding a billionaire's fate in his calloused hands, we have to go back 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, the temperature in the city dropped to 14 degrees. Marcus was 40 years old and running on 4 hours of sleep. He stood in the hallway of a decaying apartment complex on the Lower East Side. He was an independent safety inspector. His job was to tell landlords when their buildings were death traps. Most of them didn't like hearing it. He knocked on the door. A woman opened it, wrapped in a frayed wool blanket. She introduced herself as Sarah. She looked exhausted, shivering in a living room where you could see your own breath. The radiators were ice cold. Black mold crept up the drywall. Near the single window, Marcus pulled out his clipboard. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't sign off on this unit. The ventilation is completely compromised, and the heating unit is a fire hazard." Sarah didn't argue. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her oversized coat. She pulled out 2 crumpled $100 bills. She pushed them toward his chest. "Please, if you fail this inspection, the landlord will condemn the floor and kick us out. I have nowhere else to take my kid." Marcus looked at the money. $200 was exactly what he needed for his own daughter's inhaler refill. Lily had been coughing for 3 nights straight in their drafty duplex across town. It would be so easy to take the cash. He gently pushed her hand back. "I can't do that. If that heater shorts out in the middle of the night, you won't wake up." He turned around and walked down the frozen stairwell. Sarah watched him go, her expression unreadable. What Marcus didn't know was that there was no kid in that apartment, and her name wasn't Sarah. 10 minutes later, that same shivering woman walked out the back exit of the complex. She slipped into the back of a tinted luxury SUV. She tossed the frayed blanket onto the leather seat. Elena Vance was running a loyalty test. She was aggressively buying up low-income properties across the district. She needed to know which city inspectors could be bought and which ones needed to be fired. Marcus had just failed her specific brand of test, but Marcus wasn't finished with Unit 4B. An hour later, he drove his beat-up truck to a local hardware store. He looked at his bank app. His balance was $214. He walked down the aisle and picked up a heavy-duty ceramic space heater. It cost $189. He drove back to the complex and left the box outside Unit 4B. He taped a quick note to the top. "Poverty doesn't mean you have to sleep in the freezing cold. Keep your dignity and keep warm." If you also believe that honesty cannot be bought, leave a comment saying, "I choose to keep my dignity, no matter how many times adversity knocks me down." Let it be a promise to yourself. Marcus drove home to his coughing daughter with $25 to his name. The real trouble started. The very next morning, Marcus walked into his dispatch office and found his supervisor packing up his desk. "You're done, Marcus. Vance Corporation just pulled all our contracts. They specifically blacklisted your license. Said you were harassing tenants." Marcus stood there, holding his worn leather tool bag. He didn't yell. He just nodded, swallowed his pride, and walked out. That night, Lily's breathing got worse. The sound of her wheezing echoed in the small duplex. Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, holding a warm washcloth to her chest. He was a man who fixed broken things for a living, but he couldn't fix his daughter's lungs. He needed a new job, and he needed it yesterday. Then, his phone buzzed. It was an encrypted email from an old buddy who worked in the city's data management office. The message had one attachment and a short text. Thought you should see. Who actually filed the complaint against you? Marcus opened the file. It was a corporate profile photo of Elena Vance. She was wearing a designer suit and a sharp smile, but Marcus recognized those eyes. Instantly, it was Sarah, the woman he had bought the space heater for. He scrolled down to read the rest of the file. Vance Corporation wasn't just a random real estate firm. 5 years ago, they were the primary contractor that aggressively underbid and bankrupted a small construction company. That company belonged to Marcus's late wife. Elena Vance hadn't just taken his job. She was part of the machine that destroyed his family's livelihood. When Lily was just a toddler, Marcus stared at the glowing screen in the dark room. The anger rose up in his throat, thick and bitter, between the edge of hatred and the instinct to survive. He remembered his own words. I choose to keep my dignity, no matter how many times adversity knocks me down. If you're still watching, drop that exact quote in the comments right now to give Marcus the strength he needs for what comes next. The next morning, the temperature dropped another 5 degrees. Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table, calculating which bills to ignore so he could buy groceries. When a black sedan pulled up onto the frozen grass of his lawn, a man in a tailored cashmere overcoat stepped out. He didn't knock. He just stood on the porch until Marcus opened the door. The man handed Marcus a business card. Richard Sterling. He was the CEO of Sterling Holdings, the only real estate firm in the city bigger than Vance Corporation. I know about the loyalty test, Marcus, Richard said, his voice smooth and practiced. I know Elena Vance dressed up in thrift store rags to entrap city workers. He stepped inside without being invited, looking around the cramped, cold living room. His eyes lingered on Lily's oxygen machine. Elena is a parasite. She's trying to monopolize the Lower East Side. And she's firing anyone who won't play ball. But you have something I need. Richard reached into his coat and pulled out a certified bank check. He placed it on the scratched kitchen table. $500,000. There's a city council hearing on Thursday regarding Vance Corporation's zoning permits, Richard said quietly. I need you to stand at the microphone and testify that Elena didn't just offer you a bribe. I need you to say, she threatened your family. If you didn't falsify your safety reports. Marcus stared at the check. That's a lie, Marcus said. She fired me, but she didn't threaten my family. Richard smiled, a thin, cold line. Does it matter? She bankrupted your wife's company. She took your job. She put your kid in danger by cutting your paycheck. Who cares about the exact phrasing? Richard tapped the check. $500,000, Marcus. Your daughter goes to the best doctors. You move out of this freezer. All you have to do is tell one little lie to destroy a woman who already destroyed you. Richard left the check on the table and walked out. Marcus sat alone in the quiet house. For a long time, he thought about the medical bills stacked in the drawer. He thought about how easy it would be to cash that check, point the finger, and watch Elena Vance burn. But then, he looked at the empty space by the door where his tools used to sit. His wife had built her company from nothing, with clean hands and a straight back. She never compromised. Later that afternoon, Marcus walked into the marble lobby of Vance Corporation headquarters. He didn't have an appointment, but he was carrying something that made the security guards hesitate. A cheap, heavy-duty ceramic space heater. He walked straight into the private elevator and rode it to the top floor. Elena Vance was sitting behind a glass desk the size of a small boat, reviewing blueprints. When she looked up and saw the man from Unit 4B standing in her office, holding the heater, Her face went perfectly blank. "How did you get in here?" she demanded, reaching for her phone. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't slam his fists on the desk. He just walked forward and set the space heater down on the glass. "You forgot this in your apartment," he said. Elena's hand hovered over the receiver. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus pulled the $500,000 check out of his pocket and dropped it next to the heater. Elena looked at the name on the check. Richard Sterling. For the first time in her life, the billionaire real estate queen realized she was not the one holding the cards. "He wants me to testify on Thursday," Marcus said, his voice flat. "He wants me to stand in front of the cameras and lie under oath. So the city council throws you in federal prison." Elena swallowed hard. Her confident posture vanished. She looked at the man she had fired just 24 hours ago. A man wearing a faded jacket and worn-out boots. "How much do you want?" she whispered. "I'll double Richard's offer. $1 million. Just don't take the stand." Marcus looked at her. He didn't see a billionaire. He just saw a terrified woman who had forgotten what it meant to be human. If you are on the edge of your seat waiting to see what Marcus decides, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss these stories. And remind yourself of who you are by commenting, "I choose to keep my dignity, no matter how many times adversity knocks me down." Marcus picked up the check from Richard. "I don't want your money, Elena," he said softly. "I just want you to show up on Thursday." He turned and walked out, leaving the space heater on her desk. Which brings us back to Thursday morning. The city council chamber. The microphone feedback echoing off the walls. Marcus stood at the podium. In the front row, Richard Sterling sat with his lawyers, a smug smile on his face. 2 seats away, Elena Vance sat with her head bowed, waiting for the end of her career. The council president leaned into his microphone. "Mr. Marcus, you claim to have evidence regarding the business practices of Vance Corporation. The floor is yours." Marcus took a deep breath. He pulled a small black USB drive from his pocket, the drive his friend from data management had given him. 3 weeks ago, Marcus started, his voice steady. "Elena Vance disguised herself as a poor tenant and offered me a $200 bribe to ignore life-threatening safety violations." A collective gasp went through the room. The cameras flashed blindly. Richard Sterling leaned forward, his smile widening. "But," Marcus continued, raising his hand. The room fell dead silent. "I refused the bribe." Marcus pulled the certified check out of his breast pocket and held it up for the entire room to see. "Yesterday, Richard Sterling offered me $500,000 to come here today and lie under oath. He paid me to say Elena Vance threatened my family. She didn't." Richard's smile vanished. He shot up from his chair, his face turning a furious shade of red. "That is a forgery," Richard shouted. Marcus calmly plugged the USB drive into the podium. "This drive contains the surveillance footage from my front porch, capturing Mr. Sterling handing me the check and laying out his extortion plan." The council chamber erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Richard's lawyers grabbed him by the arms, desperately trying to pull him out of the room before he said another word. Elena Vance sat frozen, staring at Marcus in absolute shock. He had the power to destroy her. He had a $500,000 reason to do it. Instead, he just burned down her biggest rival and threw away the money. The council president banged his gavel repeatedly. "Order in the chamber." When the room finally quieted down, the president looked at Marcus, bewildered. "Mr. Marcus, if you aren't here to press criminal charges against Miss Vance, why are you here?" Marcus looked directly at Elena. "Because poverty isn't a game for rich people to play," Marcus said. "You fired me for having a conscience. You treat the Lower East Side like a monopoly board. I won't send you to prison, Elena, but you are going to fix what you broke." Marcus laid out his terms, backed by the council. He wouldn't file the bribery charges, but in exchange, Vance Corporation had to sign a legally binding agreement. They would immediately renovate 100% of their low-income properties. No cut corners. No cheap materials. And, Marcus added, his voice ringing through the silent hall, "You step down as CEO. You will personally oversee the renovations as the project manager." And until every single family has a working heater and a safe roof, you will live in Unit 4B. Elena didn't argue. She didn't call her lawyers. She looked at the man she had tried to ruin, tears quietly slipping down her face. For the first time in her life, she wasn't crying because she lost a deal. She was crying because someone finally taught her what real power looked like. 1 year later, the winter wind howled through the Lower East Side again. But this time, the buildings were warm. Elena Vance wasn't wearing designer suits anymore. She was wearing a thick canvas jacket, a hard hat, and a pair of scuffed work boots. She stood in the courtyard of the apartment complex, going over blueprints with a team of contractors. She lived in Unit 4B. The walls were clean, the heat worked perfectly, and she slept better than she ever had in her penthouse. She had found her humanity, in the exact place she once tried to destroy, across town. In a brightly lit, properly heated house. Marcus sat on the couch with his daughter. Lily's breathing was clear and steady. Marcus had been hired by the city as the chief independent inspector. He made a good living, not from bribes or hush money, but because the city realized that a man who couldn't be bought for $500,000 was the only man they could trust. The true test of our character doesn't happen when we are standing on top of the mountain. It happens when we are pushed into the darkest valley, when we are desperate, cold, and exhausted. That is when the devil hands you a blank check and asks you to sell your soul. Marcus could have taken the money. He could have taken the revenge. But he knew that a house bought with dirty money would never truly be warm. Leave your final comment below. I choose to keep my dignity, no matter how many times adversity knocks me down. And never forget, the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's showing them that they could never turn you into one of them.